Now streaming live on Facebook.
Excellent.
So welcome, Lucas. This is going to be so much fun. The minute I saw the project that you are working on, my jaw was dropping, first of all, but I got excited to talk to you. And so I want you to tell everybody about this incredible documentary you're making, but also about the Kickstarter campaign that you just did, because when I checked, and tell me if I'm wrong, but like 2 days after you launched it, it seemed like you had already hit your goal.
It blew up. Yeah, that was one thing with Kickstarter. You can't change the amount that you're asking for afterwards, and without launching this, without actually getting this message out there and everything, Lincoln and I had very little to go off of, which is on what we should be expecting, I guess. And it really blew up. People really love this story. People are really intrigued and interested with this, and I can't blame them, because it's really an intriguing story at its very base. You don't have to embellish or even say anything.
So take us back a bit, because what I find really interesting is that you wrote the Wikipedia page. So we'll give people a little bit of context. So, this event that happened with the Dave Matthews tour bus, which you can probably describe, in a much nicer way than I can. But basically, this event where 800 pounds of liquid waste was dumped from the tour bus onto a passing boat underneath. You wrote a Wikipedia page about that. What inspired you to write that? What drew you to it? And then tell us what happened since then.
Well, I've lived in Chicago my whole life. And when this originally happened in 2004, I must have been, come to think of it, I must have been 7. I thought it was 8, but I must have been almost 8. I must have been 7. And to a 7-year-old, nothing could be funnier than this. I mean, this is just the pinnacle of comedy. And I was like, I cannot believe that this happened. This is so great.
Right.
And over time, and it's interesting, because this is also a sentiment that I've heard from people who are actually involved in the event. Over time, it stopped being like this shocking thing, and it kind of faded into this almost legendary status. And that was the point. It was about 4 years ago when I wrote the Wikipedia article, because I looked it up and I was stunned to learn that there was no Wikipedia article on this very integral world event, and I decided it required one. But
what made it an integral world event in your world? Like, so that 4 years ago, you're like, wait, where is this?
For anyone listening to this who doesn't know what this event is, I think I should give a little bit of an overview of what exactly happened. Which is that the Dave Matthews Band was having they were having a 2-day concert in Wisconsin, and for some reason they decided to stay in downtown Chicago. And between day 1 and day 2, one of their 5 tour buses decided to empty its septic tank over the Chicago River, because Chicago bridges are open grates. They allow liquid to fall through. If you've seen it, you can look up through it or down through it to the river, or up to the sky. And so this bus driver, who should have emptied his septic tank the night before, said, "Oh, I didn't have time to empty my septic tank." Well, no matter, I can just empty it into the river, which is, of course, highly illegal, and that's polluting. And he didn't know, when he hit the button to empty it into the river, that underneath the bridge at the time was a Chicago architecture tour boat with 120 people on board and no roof. It was an open roof architecture tour. Everybody was hit a little, at the very least, a little bit. About 80 people of the 120 were described by the state of Illinois as having been soaked by the decision. And the bus driver had no idea that this occurred. Just went on, with his life like normal, while the rest of the people on the boat were panicking, screaming, and trying to figure out what was going on. That's the basis of the event. It kind of blossomed. It turned into this utterly bizarre event when people eventually figured out that it was a Dave Matthews Band bus, and the Dave Matthews Band denied any responsibility and said, "No, we know where all of our buses were at the time. It couldn't have been us." And it kind of turned into this he said, she said, until the East Bank Club, which is a local gym, kind of this high-end gym, released security footage that proved that it was them. And then it all kind of came tumbling down. This is it's a really crazy story. The little details are really the things that kill you about it. Like how, for example, after this happened, after this was dumped upon, and people were screaming and vomiting and trying to figure out what was going on, they got back to the port. Everyone got off the ship, and then they decided to hose it off in time for the next tour.
Oh. Wow, got to keep to the schedule no matter what.
It's little things like that. Or like, for example, when they released that security footage that proved that it was this bus, Mayor Daley said, this is a paraphrase quote. He said that he believed that the dumping was absolutely unacceptable, but that regardless, he still believed that the Dave Matthews Band was quote a very good band. And so it's really the little details about this absolutely insane event that really get you, and the fact that this is such a tiny, it's like winning the lottery, or I suppose losing it.
Yeah.
Having this happen to you.
Well, are you a Dave Matthews fan? Is that what made you follow the story, or was it just the
No,
audacity and the uniqueness of the story?
frankly, even though I could say, having written the article and knowing all of these things about it and learning and speaking to the passengers and having all this firsthand knowledge given to me, as well as reading about it at great length, I can confidently say that I am the world expert in this subject. And that being said, I know almost nothing about the Dave Matthews Band as a band.
Okay.
I don't know very many of their songs. I don't really know that much about them as people.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to in order to find the event funny. It's
Right.
the fact that it's them is, like, in its own sense a little bit ironic, because they're very environmentally conscious.
Right.
They're very committed to doing the right thing, and the fact that this happened under their watch is, like, kind of ironically funny from that perspective. But even that isn't, I don't think, the core of what's funny about it, which is that it's this it's such a bizarre and strange event to have even occurred in the first place. Most people I find that really engage with the story and find it really funny and interesting, and it speaks to them on a personal level, don't know anything about the Dave Matthews Band.
Right. Sure. And so you describe yourself as an amateur historian. So
Mhm.
I'm sure learning that this strange piece of Chicago history wasn't being more delved into, so to speak, like, is that what really piqued your interest and made you decide to look into it further? And then, so you wrote the article and then decided to do a documentary about it.
That's right. Yeah, that's to me. This is it's such a funny and unique thing to have
Yeah.
occurred, that the idea that there wasn't already a Wikipedia article about this incident was astonishing to me. And the moment I wrote it, and the years following, in the 4 years since then, it's become super popular. It's really spoken to a lot of people, and I think that then justifies its notability enough to be made not
Right.
only into a Wikipedia article, but to be turned into a movie. I think a couple years ago, in 2022, on the anniversary on August 8th, it was the 17th most read article on Wikipedia worldwide, sandwiched in
Oh my
between the article
gosh.
for YouTube and the article for India that day.
Wow.
Pretty funny. So it's something on a very base level. This it's a great desire of mine, and I know it's a great desire of Lincoln's as well. To take these stories that revolve around Chicago and make them known to a world audience.
Yeah.
And that's not something I
Yeah.
don't think. Yeah,
Well,
it's
I was
not
gonna say
something.
you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say you've made other films though, right? So this is not your first film. So you have been working in this medium for a while, I'm assuming, or you've done more than one film. Is that correct? Or give me a little bit of history on exactly what I know you've worked with Lincoln on something, or you
That's
wrote
right.
the last movie that Lincoln worked on with you.
That's right. Yeah, Lincoln and I co-produced this movie. I directed. Lincoln was director of photography, and then we both produced it together.
Okay.
It's called Ring Ring. It's a short film. Sorry. I wrote it last year, and I showed it to Lincoln, and Lincoln said, I think we can really make this. I think we can turn this into a film. And we did. We shot it last year in September, between September and November. And since then, it's been in post-production, and we're going to be done with it, fully done, next month. So that's exciting and really cool. I got a pretty integral piece of information today that'll go into the film. So we're almost done. Be done next month, which I'm very excited about.
Great.
But the part of the genesis of that as well, and part of the thing that was really carrying us through it is to bring Chicago out into a world stage again. Because people around the world, they know, I mean, they know things about Chicago. You go anywhere in the world and people will say, "Oh, Chicago, I know,
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, or more recently Obama, or once upon a
Yeah.
time they would go Al Capone, and then
I was gonna say that was always my experience overseas, is people would say Chicago, Al Capone, bang bang,
that's
it's
what
like,
happened
oh,
to me. That's what happened to
we've
me
got
in
other things.
Japan.
Yeah.
I went to this really tiny sushi restaurant, and the sushi chef behind the counter was like, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Chicago." And he went, put down his knives, and he went, "Taka, taka, 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 taka." And I was like, "That's it. That's the one. You got it."
Yeah, we have to be like, oh, okay, yeah, we can't argue with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So you want to bring attention to Chicago. It's just an amazingly funny, crazy story. But you are a storyteller. Tell us a little bit about your background. And did you study film? Did you study any sort of writing? Do you have a different background? And how did you come to, want to make these films and dive into these kind of offbeat stories?
Yeah, sure. Well, I studied in college. I studied advertising, and
Okay.
after that, I went to a portfolio school for art direction, which is what I do now. I work at an advertising agency as an art director. To a certain degree, and I think that this really helps with film as well. Advertising is the most simple form of storytelling, and by that I mean you can make a really complex story in advertising, but the more complex you make it, the less it works.
Mm,
Advertising really makes you take a big story and distill it down to its absolute simplest message, and that's what you end up with. That's what you end up telling people.
yeah.
Um, and part of, I think, my push into this kind of realm of storytelling outside of advertising is I'm making all these messages. I'm making these messages for brands, and I'm making these messages for these big companies. But why can't I make a message, for something that I really believe in as a person, and that is putting Chicago on a world stage, that is telling these great stories, and engaging people around the world in something that's important to me as a person, beyond just what is important in a business venture.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's
I
and
love
film to me is the most powerful form of storytelling. It's really the thing that,
that.
and when I say film, I don't just mean movies. I mean also television, internet videos. It's the thing I think that speaks to people the most. It's really the
Mm,
thing I think that film is when you can fully drop your disbelief,
yeah.
and dive into something. I
Yeah.
think it works better than text, audio by itself. The only thing I think that
Yeah.
could possibly compete is video games, but film to me really doesn't.
Well, it's your art direction or your artistic abilities must help with that visual piece of it. I know even, with writing, I struggle more with creating a visual sense. I see things in my mind, but for me, the thing that draws me into writing is more interpersonal stuff. It's more emotional connection, and I have to push a little harder to kind of see things in what I would say like Technicolor, and to describe them. I'm
Mhm.
not someone who goes into a lot of depth with description, but I do think that it's good for all writers to think in terms of the visual. And sometimes I'll say to people who I'm working with, like, think about if you had a video camera or a movie camera, and you're picking that up and we're seeing it, the immediate experience of what are we looking at? Where are we in time and space? What's the setting? And I think you
Mhm.
probably have that just built in as this natural ability because you're so visual. But I do think all writers can think in those terms, like, what are we looking at? Even if we just have a blank page in front of us, we have to think in terms of like what world are we creating for our reader
Mhm.
or viewer to be immersed in.
Well, the
Um,
the, the ultimate lesson from advertising, I think, is that if you have a really good story, if you have a really compelling story, it doesn't just work in one medium. A
mm,
really compelling story works in every medium.
yeah,
Um, a really compelling story you should be able to tell in any way and be able to grab people's attention. And of course, there's going to be some mediums in which it works better. There's going to be some mediums in which it works a little worse, but a really great story should be able to grab people no matter what direction it's told from.
Yeah. I like what you said though about the advertising really boiling something down to one thing, the simplest form of the message. That's interesting because, again, that kind of goes across different art forms because like, with writing fiction, we talk about making sure there's a really crystallized want or desire in every scene so that it's, you can really name what does the character want here. And just boiling it down to that essence. And also in memoir, thinking about when you look at all the different scenes from your life or all these events and you think, what do I include? What goes in the story? What do I leave in? What do I put out, put in or take out? It's really finding the essence of the experience, so if you need to convey that in this particular scene, you were sort of, entering the dark cave or something, then what is the one scene from your life that's like the essence of I'm going to die or, I have to live or die or something, so I think that's kind of a cool commonality about everything is like, you really got to put a lot of thought into this stuff and boil it down. Like, again, what are you trying to say? Can you bring it down to one word or one feeling?
I think that's why, to a certain degree, it's like they say, long stories are for people who don't have time to make them short. And when it comes to advertising, when it comes to even short stories, short films, you can't say that much. You can't shove tons of messages. You can't put tons of character depth into it. You got to be able to say one thing. With advertising, it's especially potent because you're not only trying to say something, everyone else is also trying to say something.
Yeah.
So you got to think about, it's especially potent, I think, in an era in which everyone watched television. You got to think about all the commercials and you got to think about, what do I even remember from these commercials? Which commercials do I even remember I saw? When a client says, we want to tell people that we're fast and cheap and you can find us anywhere, people can't remember that. You're kind of given a lot of information and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But if you really want to hammer it home, you got to say one thing. You got to tell a client in advertising, what is it that you want people to remember about your brand or your product more than anything else? And they might say, okay, well, I want people to know that we're fast. And that's it. That's what you say. I mean, that itself is the essence of like Jimmy John's, for example.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, how much though does emotion come into it? Yeah, they're fast, super fast. Like, do you in advertising? Do you really get into like trying to get that emotional identification? Because I know, in narrative and type of writing I do, that's the whole goal, right? Is to have emotional identification with your reader. Like, I believe that's why we read, just to have that sense of identifying. So in advertising, would you say you don't need that, or is that
it's necessary more than even in standard storytelling? Because in standard storytelling, you can ask yourself, and you really should be asking yourself, what do I want my audience to be thinking right now?
Yeah.
What emotion do I want my audience to be feeling, and what's the best way that I can convey that? In advertising, I guess in storytelling, you can say that. You can say all that. You can say, I want my audience to feel happy about this. I want them to feel confused. I want them to feel scared by the thing that's happening in this scene or what I'm describing. But at the end of the day, if it conveys an emotion in your audience, I think most storytellers are pretty happy if it makes their audience, think something even that they never imagined.
Yeah.
In advertising, someone is paying you to make something that works exactly the way they describe it to you. So it's even more important in advertising because it's not just about conveying an emotion. It's not just about making something seem important, but making something the exact way that you were told to do it, and you don't want people to misinterpret it. That's why, for example, in the Super Bowl, you end up with so many forgettable ads sometimes, is because so often clients say, we don't want to take any chances. We don't want to mess this up. We can't have people take away anything from this $20 million ad except exactly what we want them to think. So
Yeah.
the issue is I think in advertising that it's so much more prescribed. The storytelling has to be precise. It's like, to me, it's like the difference between baking and frying food.
Yeah, big difference there. Yeah, I like that. Well, okay, so let's go back to your documentary just for a bit to give a good plug for your fundraiser, because like we mentioned, so you just to again give more context about this, you set up the was it GoFundMe or Kickstarter?
Kickstarter.
Kickstarter campaign to raise some funds to do this documentary where you're going to go in search of people who were actually on the boat, because no one's come forward, right? And never heard a firsthand event or a firsthand account from any of these people. So you're the guy that's going to track them down and tell this. And that's what the documentary will be. So I believe your goal was 5,000, and you hit that in what, 2 days? Something.
Yeah, 3 days. 3 days.
3 days. Okay, so
And
that
that's
doesn't mean people can't still give, though. The
no,
more, the
they
better.
still can. Our campaign continues to run for another 3 weeks, and I swear every single bit that's donated goes straight into making the movie better. That's
Yeah.
when it comes to filmmaking, I think there's a certain point that you can hit where adding money doesn't make the film better, but you would have to be a Hollywood movie. You would have to be spending hundreds of millions on the movie.
Yeah.
We are a small, scrappy, independent bunch, and we know how to stretch dollars. So any bit will directly go to making this movie better.
Yes, yes. And I can attest to the fact that you've done this before, and you've, put your heart, sweat, blood, and tears and all of that into it. And I'm sure this will be no different. And I hope people will continue to give and give you guys a nice little, starting point there to make this.
But yeah, the story behind the documentary, and of course, documentaries, even though they're on real subjects, really do need a story just as much as a narrative film.
Yeah.
The story of this is that there are remarkably few firsthand accounts of what it was like to be on the boat. In fact, up until last week, there was one. There was one account.
Really?
Yep. It was
Do you think
by
they
a man
can't
named
speak? Were they paid and they can't speak? Did they get a settlement, and maybe that's part of it? That these people can't say anything, or
I don't know about that. It could be the case. I don't know if it is the case. No one's told me that yet.
okay, you'll find out.
I think it's just because it was 2004, and people couldn't just really go online for the most part and talk about this sort of stuff. That it was still mostly stories through official sources. So the one firsthand account that we had was by a guy named Brett McNeil, who was a Tribune reporter. He was on the boat, and he was able to describe briefly for the Tribune article what it was like. I found myself another guy a few years ago who was in fact, I found this when I was writing the article originally, and I couldn't put it in the Wikipedia article because it's not considered credible. It's just a account. It was a guy who was a crew member, must have been a college job. He must have been 18 or 19. He was down below deck when he heard the commotion upstairs and came up to see it all. But he wrote this very long description, which he then posted on the internet. He posted it on this old forum called Something Awful, which is like, the equivalent of Reddit 20 years ago.
And that qualifies for that forum, I would say.
Yeah. Well, oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. And he goes on to describe this, but he titles it "You'll never believe my day at work today," and then he goes on to describe it. And this was before there was any big news, so some of the comments are like, "What are you talking about?" And they didn't know it was the Dave Matthews Band or anything like that. It was like posted day of, or maybe the next morning. It's really interesting. I reached out to him a few years ago when I first wrote it, and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of making a documentary. Would you be a part of it someday?" And he said, "No, absolutely not. I don't want to remember this event." Which is, it's his right, of course, to say that he experienced it. But at the same time, he did write this big, long article about how he thought it was funny and ridiculous the day it happened. So
yeah, so maybe if he puts even more distance between him and the event, he'll be willing to revisit. Yeah. Well,
yeah, the main story is trying to find these people, and then the side story is, what does this mean to the psyche of Chicago? Why is this such a big deal? Why do people resonate so much with this? I met people last week who flew in from out of town. I met a group of people that flew in from New Jersey, Texas. I met people who flew in from Texas with a custom shirt that said Chicago Poop Fest on it, 2024.
What?
And it's not like they even came here for anything besides this. They told me they came here just to be here on the 20th anniversary.
Oh my gosh, this is
really
crazy.
Care about this. Oh yeah.
Are these people, I know Dave Matthews my understanding is has some pretty rabid fans. Are these Dave Matthews fans, or are these just like bizarre and unusual and I want to be a part of it type people?
No, these are definitely fans of the unusual, fans of the strange
Yeah.
and unique. I'd say
Yeah.
I did meet some people who are genuine Dave Matthews Band fans, but like, thought it was funny.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, the Dave Matthews Band community is relatively split on this. I think they're all familiar with it. And some of them think this is hilarious and we need to embrace it.
Yeah.
And the other half think this is ridiculous and Dave Matthews has already apologized for it. And why should he have to revisit this and all that kind of
Right.
thing?
Back off,
Like,
man. Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's great that you're revisiting it, and it's going to be just so funny to see. I mean, just based on your trailer that you guys made, which I'm going to encourage everybody. I'm going to link it below. So everybody watch the trailer. It's so funny. And also consider also donating more to the Kickstarter, because like you said, every cent will make this happen and is useful. So
that's right. Yeah, and unlike a GoFundMe, a Kickstarter as well has rewards for those who engage in this, and you can not only receive intangible awards such as being the first person to see the movie, or having an actual credit within the movie itself, becoming a producer or an associate producer. You can also get actual physical rewards, which we have there as T-shirts that say the crappening on the front with our logo, and on the back have a very nauseating quote from the state of Illinois settlement case. You can also get a poster, and
okay.
you can also, if you decide to go with a certain tier that we have, you can actually get Dave Matthews Band river water, and that is water collected from the source, from the exact place, by the bucket on a string.
Oh my gosh. I
We call
love
it
it.
we call it unholy water, and that's exactly how it'll be presented.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to check that out. That's pretty cool. I love the logo. I want a t-shirt for sure. So all right. Well, thank you so much for telling us all about it. It's been really great chatting with you, and I
Thank you,
appreciate you
Jamie.
coming on so
Thank you.
quickly,
Thank you
riding the wave
for
of
inviting me
this.
on.
Yeah, this is great. So have a great weekend, and I'll link everything below, and we'll maybe we'll check in as the movie progresses, and we can hear more about how it's going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to. I would love to check in.
Okay, great. Well, take care. Thanks again.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye bye.
Ciao.